and welcome to my channel. I have been creating content on YouTube for about 16 years and I usually talk about style and also how to inject a little bit of French je ne sais quoi to your life. So I'm creating a new series of videos where I'm going to be talking about French brands and explaining a little bit about their products, their history, and as well how to pronounce the models and the objects that they sell. And I'm going to start, obviously, we need to start with Hermès because Hermès is the pinnacle of French style. And if you love Hermès, you've probably realized that there's a whole language that comes with it. So how do you actually pronounce Togo, Chèvre, Étoupe, or Faubourg? What does Sellier mean? What is the difference between a Kelly Sellier and a Kelly Retourné? What is a Carré? So if you're wondering about all of these things, in this series, we're going to decode the language of Hermès. I'm going to show you how to pronounce the words correctly and what they actually mean, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history and background along the way. So whether you're a long-term Hermès collector, a first-time buyer, or you're simply shopping on the resale market and you want to know what on earth the listings mean, then welcome to this Hermès glossary. So without further ado, let's jump in. The first word that we need to pronounce is, of course, Hermès. So I'll say it again, Hermès. Hermès was created in 1837 by Thierry Hermès in Paris, and it began as a modest harness workshop serving European noblemen. But obviously, when we moved from horses to cars, suddenly saddles were not as needed as they used to be. And so the son of the original founder pivoted the business model to create instead leather goods, luxury leather goods. So the Hermès family were pioneers, innovators, and they, for example, were responsible for bringing the zipper over to Europe and starting to create bags and leather goods that contain zippers. They also were around 1937 responsible for introducing the first, of course, silk scarf. Hermès is very famous for those, and all of their the culture of their company, the branding, the spirit of the company remains really steeped in the equestrian culture because they started as saddle makers. Of course, now they're very famous for the Kelly and the Birkin. The Kelly was made extremely famous by Princess Grace Kelly of Monaco. When she was pregnant and she was hounded by the paparazzi, she essentially hid her pregnant belly with the Kelly from Hermès. And so a few years after that event and after that, the photo of her and that bag were plastered all over the newspapers, they changed the name of the bag to Kelly. Similarly, there's a urban myth which is actually true about how Jane Birkin, who was a British actress but had married a French singer, so she lived in France, and one day she was on an airplane with the CEO of the Hermès company in 1984, and she had just become a mother and was complaining about how the bags that she had access to were all too small and too fiddly, and she needed something big that she could just chuck all her new mom gear into. And so on the basis of that conversation, Hermès then created the absolutely legendary Birkin bag. So there's a lot of aura around that brand, a lot of myth and like storied things that are really interesting to explore and to know about. Now let's talk a little bit about those two extremely famous bags, so the Kelly and the Birkin. You can buy them in two versions. So there is Sellier. So the Sellier leather is hard and it has been stitched on the outside. So the thread is outside the bag. And that results in a bag that is quite structured and retains its shape very well. On the other hand, the Retourné is made by stitching the bag first and then flipping it, so making it inside out. And that's what Retourné means. It means flipped. And that results in a bag that is a bit slouchier, a bit softer, and can basically be a bit softer essentially. Okay, so not as rigid. So I'll here you have the image of both to see the difference between the two methods. Palladium is of course the white gold or silver color of hardware. Palladium. You're also going to get the golden color. It's plaqué or, which means gold plated. Plaqué or. There are a few other words, like for example, clochette is the little leather piece that keeps the keys safe. La tirette is the zipper. If you're playing the Hermès game and you need to explain what you want to buy in order to achieve the leather appointment, then you could use you could use and buy objects such as, for example, a Carré Hermès. So this is a Carré Hermès. It's the long 90 centimeter by 90 centimeter silk scarf, and it's called un Carré Hermès. If you're after the smaller ones, so there is a very small version that used to be worn in the pocket of a blazer, and that's called a gavroche, un gavroche. And the one that you wrap around the handle of your bags, that's called a twilly, un twilly. The very famous sandals that Hermès has created, they're called orans. For the simple epurated one, and for the slightly chunkier one, it's called chypre. Now, all of these, I can add, if you'd like me to help you pronounce other objects, please don't hesitate to comment so that I can add a few pronunciations on things that you're interested in buying at Hermès. I also thought it would be helpful to add a few words around craftsmanship. So, for example, clou de selle is essentially a stud that held a saddle together, and now it's become a few products, for example, that you can buy at Hermès, one of them being a bracelet, for example. Now, another nice word that you might want to be able to pronounce is la piqûre sellier. It's basically a sewing technique that is very traditional and is used in leather crafting to ensure that two threads meet in the middle, and that the sewing is very solid and robust over time. So this basically is something that you cannot do with a machine, so it shows essentially that it's been done by hand. The store has been for decades at the same address, which is 24 Faubourg Saint-Honoré. So I will say that again so that you can pronounce it. So 24 Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré. 24 Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré. In France, we don't really talk about a brand. If it's a very high-level brand, we don't say a brand, we say a house, so a fashion house. And the way to say that is, in French, is une maison. Hermès famously talks about their goods as objects, so that's the way to say that in French is un objet. Now, if you want to wow your essay and you want to, for example, make an appointment and use the correct terminology, an essay in French is conseiller de vente. So if you want a leather appointment, that is called a rendez-vous maroquinerie. So leather goods and leather craft is called maroquinerie. And a meeting, an appointment is called rendez-vous. So rendez-vous maroquinerie. So for example, you could make a sentence with that. You could say, je voudrais un rendez-vous maroquinerie pour acheter mon sac Kelly au magasin 24 rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré. And that means I would like to make an appointment, a leather appointment, to buy a Kelly bag at the address of the Hermès shop called 24 rue Faubourg Saint-Honoré. So there you have it, your introduction to the language of Hermès. But this is only the beginning, and if you want to go deeper, I've made separate videos on Hermès leathers, Hermès bag models, and Hermès colors. So we'll look at each one in much more detail and with a little bit of an explanation of what each one is, and as well as the correct French pronunciation. If you can pronounce them correctly, then hopefully you can impress your essay and make sure that you maintain good relationships with them, and so that you can play the Hermès game with a little bit of an advantage in your back pocket. So if you're building your Hermès vocabulary, or simply want to feel a little more confident the next time you walk into a boutique or browse on a resale listing, have a look at the rest of this series. I hope to see you in the next video, and if you like this, you know what to do. Thank you. See you later. Bye.